Hello, and welcome to World Water Week. Urbanization is on an accelerated rise, but faltering water and sanitation systems pose huge challenges to achieving equitable and sustainable urban development. WASH systems often lag behind other basic services, creating negative impacts for health, education, and economic growth. Today, we're taking a closer look at why investments in water and sanitation are lagging and what needs to be done to achieve truly integrated urban development. For this discussion, I am joined by Dr. Amika Godfrey, Executive Director for International Programs at WaterAid. Amika has worked with water and sanitation for over 2 decades across numerous countries in Africa and South Asia. We're also joined by Hezekiah Pide. Pide leads the water and sanitation team at UN-Habitat and has 25 years of experience in water and sanitation governance, policy, and institutional capacity development support. And Anna Hessle is an international director at Sweco Architects. She brings strong experience in sustainable urban planning, urban design, and sustainable architecture. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Pide, I think it's so great that we have UN-Habitat here in focus at World Water Week. Help our audience get up to speed. What are the big challenges facing cities in an increasingly urbanized world?
Thank you for this question. One of the main challenges facing cities in the 21st century is rapid urbanization and increase in the urban population. Now, this increase is not the problem itself. The big problem is how do we plan for services such as water and sanitation going forward. And one of the problems that we have in cities that are poorly planned is the problem of congestion and mostly urban sprawl in the outer parts of the city that makes provision of water and sanitation services a problem. The problem of increasing pollution and environmental degradation in cities is also another challenge that is caused by poor planning. So how do we plan our cities better? One, by prioritizing high-density development, nature-based solutions, and also encouraging mixed use where commercial buildings, residential buildings, and green spaces are better integrated. But even more importantly is to look at how we can strengthen the capacity of service providers to manage this demand for services. And at UN-Habitat, we have a Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance where public utilities work together through partnerships to meet this demand. The next challenge is the slum crisis and the increasing socioeconomic inequalities in our cities. And one of the problems in a slum is access to water and sanitation services. So how do we better plan for slum transformation to ensure better access to services? But even more importantly, how do we deal with spatial segregation and lack of economic opportunities in slums? The next one is the housing crisis and lack of social housing. And this is a huge problem because not so many people who deal with the housing issues think about water and sanitation and how water and sanitation is required to service these residences. How do we then develop inclusive housing policies? How do we ensure that we promote mixed income neighborhoods? And also, how do we ensure affordability in social housing? Lastly is climate change. Up to 500 cities are already experiencing hardships related to adverse weather effects, affecting up to 517 million people. So how do we integrate issues around resilience in planning for climate change in our cities? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think that last point there, particularly the importance of needing to plan for climate change, but also overlaying that with some of the other things that you talked about, like the need for slum transformation. I think there's some huge challenges, but great opportunities on the horizon. Amika, I would love to come to you now. Water and sanitation are essential for life anywhere. We know this. But so then why or how is it that water and sanitation infrastructure is being forgotten when we're planning, modernizing, expanding urban areas, and what's at risk if we don't get it right?
Yeah, thanks, Kanika. I think I will build off what Pire was saying in urban planning. If you look at how cities and towns are planned, it's often the urban planners sitting with governments and doing the planning. So everything is taken care of, the road network, the schools, and then you have the water and sanitation infrastructure planning being done completely by another aspect of the government. So you never find a period where the government, who is supposed to lead everybody, brings all the critical sectors together when we're doing urban planning and urban designs. And you find a situation where Pira is describing with the slum problems we're having, increasing urban population, yet planning is continuously and to be done in isolation of all the critical sectors that should be sitting on the table. So what happens when we don't have that? What is at risk? I mean, we see what is happening now. Climate change is beginning to exacerbate what is already. Cholera is becoming endemic. In a lot of places where we see irregular and infrequent outbreaks, it's now becoming almost a yearly thing and continuously being there. We know a lot of our urban centers and towns, you can barely walk without treading on sewage all across. For example, in my recent visits, I take two cities which you can not compare with each other. Lagos, which we know has about over 20 million people, and then you get Kigali, which is another capital but smaller, all having similar challenges. And one of the things we're seeing in those cities, how can we go back and retrofit what is already being done? Is it possible to undo it? Is it possible to now begin to install water and sanitation infrastructure? And both governments are struggling. Everyone is struggling to say, what do we do? So in addition to having the risk of existing cities, we also have the risk of future cities not learning from what we've done before. So really the risk is high. It's economical, it's health, it's just pure dignity of humans existing.
Pure dignity. I mean, such an important point there, but also I really hear that call for, the challenges that come with retrofitting and how are we going to go back and fix these things if we don't do it right in the first place. And I think, Anna, that's where we're super excited to have you here with us in a very different voice, I think, for many of us here at World Water Week to talk about urban planning. So we've heard now from Amika, what are those gaps? We have very segregated groups not coming together to talk about these issues. So as someone who's coming from the urban planning side of things, how can we better link the two worlds of urban planning and water and sanitation infrastructure, and what needs to change?
Very good question, and lots of challenges, as we've heard. And we need to work in a more integrated and holistic way in our urban planning processes. And right from the start, early stages. So it's traditionally urban planners and all the different disciplines have been very siloed. And so it calls for a new role of the urban planner as well, to facilitate a process, a co-creative process between all these experts, rather than first drawing up a beautiful master plan and then the experts come in. So we all have to sit around the same table from the start, including water, waste, energy, transportation, all the experts, but also experts from finance and operations. So we find feasible solutions. So and of course, most importantly, the people living in the place, they are the experts of that place. They're experts of their community, their needs, and also what can be the opportunities. So we can't miss that. And so it's a new skill set of the urban planner that's needed for this co-creative process. And then we will be able to plan economically feasible plans. Perhaps they're more decentralized, more self-sufficient, more resilient for climate change. And they promote local circular economy and also opportunities for service providers.
So I think it's a really fitting point. I mean, Pete touched on the need for slum transformation. What I'm hearing from you is a totally different kind of transformation. It's a transformation of how we're all relating to each other, how we're discussing these things, and who's at the table. We need everybody there, finance, operations, the technical experts, but the communities at that core. So I hear that very strongly, the need for a stronger and a different co-creation process. Amika, we've talked a lot about what are the risks and challenges, but I'm also curious to hear more about the opportunities. What do we stand to gain if we get this right, and why do we need to act right now?
I think it's a question that we stand to gain a lot if we get it right now. Let's just start with the basic human dignity that people don't have to tread on their own waste when they get into their houses. So if you look at a lot of cities in the global south, there's a lot of very swanky apartments going on. We were discussing that later in Nairobi, in Lagos, in everywhere. But everybody still has to go through the same thing to get into those apartments. So we stand to gain a lot where we begin to live in a place that is fit for humans. We stand to gain a lot where the modernity that a lot of our leaders are striving to get to with a lot of our cities. Everybody wants to be like in Nigeria, where I come from. We would like to be like, Lagos would like to be like a city in Europe. One of the clean cities, not all of it, sorry, where everything is really well organized and there's water and sanitation infrastructure, the road network, the light. But to do that, you have to get the core foundation right. And to get that core foundation right is to really begin from the time when you start to design to bring everybody together. And we've seen it happen. It's not as if there are no examples. So if we look at, we did a study as WaterAid many years ago to look at, is it actually possible for this to happen? And we came up with the report of what we're calling the Asian Tigers. So that includes Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, where government really led this kind of future cities development where they brought everyone to the table and say, I want a modern green city. And therefore, everyone sat at the table. So some of those cities are beginning to get their water and sanitation right. And just lastly, more recently, we all know that Rwanda is developing a new airport city. So the airport is moving from Kigali to a place called Bugesera. And Bugesera, at the moment, the mayor is really taking this forward and bringing everybody to the table. Having said that, it was not easy to get water and sanitation on the master plan. It took a lot of push and a lot of effort because there were bigger people with bigger posts on the ground looking at what else needs to come in before you even think of water and sanitation.
Isn't that fascinating? I mean, the thing that we all need, even right here in front of us, the glasses, the thing that we absolutely need is not necessarily prioritized by those who are making these big decisions. So I come back to Anna's point about the need for co-creation process. But I also very much pick up what you're saying there, Amika, in terms of, I think there's two very important words that came out from what you're saying. You said it earlier as well, dignity. We're all going through the same things. And so I think empathy as well. I think those in power, those who are sitting at these decision-making tables, we need to have maybe a stronger empathetic tone to things. Remember what's at stake, as you're saying. Before we wrap up, we've got about 6 minutes left with us. I'd like us to take our eyes set more now towards the future. Clearly, the way we're doing things now isn't quite working. So what do you think we need as the way forward? What do we think the way forward looks like? If we talk about the co-creation process, what is it that needs to change, and who or what do we need to get there? Pete, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. One of the call to action really is better integration of water and sanitation service planning with the wider urban planning and development processes. And one way of achieving this is looking at integration of spatial plans in cities, how we design our cities, where the roads will be, where the pipes will be, and looking at how all these service systems link together. And we have been supporting local governments in Habitat to better integrate water and what we call infrastructure and service provision with a wider agenda of urban development. And data is very critical in this sense. We have in Habitat developed what we call an urban monitoring framework, where we collect data in cities to track SDG 6 and SDG 11, and looking at how cities are doing in terms of sustainable development. The next one, which is very important, is prioritizing people in urban planning. How do we encourage public participation? How do we learn from the residents? Demystifying urban planning and making it open in such a way that we include local people in doing this. In Habitat, we have what we call our city plans. And our city plans is a toolbox for integrated participatory process of including city residents in urban planning. And lastly, prioritizing water and sanitation in national urban policies. With support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UN-Habitat has done national assessments in Kenya and also in Nepal to look at the extent to which our national urban policies are prioritizing water and sanitation. How do we make water and sanitation the center of our national urban policies?
I think that's a really important point that I just want to just underscore once again, that need for prioritization, that need, and especially as you're saying, at the national urban policy planning level. Anna, let me go to you. What do you think we need to look at in the future? What does the way forward look like?
Yeah, I would say two key words here: the process, the planning process, and also an integrated participatory process. So we need to put more effort on the methodology to include all these important stakeholders in our planning processes. And in Sweden, supported by SIDA, Symbiocity methodology has been developed for many decades, and we're using that at Sweco very successfully in all globally to facilitate planning processes. And then in these processes, you really can adapt your process to that unique setting. So no site or place is similar. You have to always have a unique approach.
So the importance of contextualization is what I'm hearing from you. But there is potentially a process, or there is something to be learning from, and so the Symbiocities approach is something. But yes, I think it's really important. I think both Peter and you are talking about it a little bit, that the need for us to maybe inspire and drive this change, but maybe also thinking about that next generation of urban planner and who's going to be sitting at these tables in the future, that we need to start that thinking now, not just the retrofitting and those challenges that come with that, as Amika pointed out earlier. Amika, please tell us, what do you think the future holds? What does it look like? What do we need to do to get there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've sat on a lot of these panels many times. This is the first time we're going to have a large private corporate city development architect private firm sitting on the table with us. And this has never happened, even in most countries where WaterAid is existing in 23 countries. I have not encountered any time I sat with a large private sector enterprise. And we know that money talks. The policies are there in many governments, and it's there. But to action those policies, it needs money to do it. And often, whoever has the largest purse is who the government listens to. So it's when we sit with people like Anna to say to the government and say, we need to bring everyone to the table. They are the ones that will bring it. So housing is very visible. Roads are very visible. Schools are very visible. Those core political points, water and sanitation infrastructure is often not visible because they are either underground pipes or things happening to support the flashy ones. So unless the people with money are convinced that you prioritize what supports what is visible, then we are going nowhere with what we do. There are a lot of fancy urban plans, but it needs money to develop. So I really want us to leave this room with the three people sitting in this room, not just the three of us, but the sectors we represent, coming together for once and really sitting. And then I think with one voice, choose a couple of places where we go and work with the government and almost like force the government to bring other sectors together to the table. That's really the way forward. Otherwise, the green cities we look for and we're all striving to get, we will not achieve. It won't be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think that's a very clear call to action. We all have work to do leaving here today. We have to put this on the table. And as Amika said, bring a little bit more visibility to this very, unfortunately, somehow hidden problem. So thank you very much for that call to action. And I agree. I think it's really fascinating and wonderful to have a partner like SWECO here at the table because you, I think, have a really important job of nudging in the right direction. Same with UN-Habitat and, of course, with WaterAid as well, but it is a different stakeholder to have at the table with us. Amika, Pire, Anna, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today and shining a very important light on the water and sanitation infrastructure needs of a rapidly urbanizing world. And we'll be very closely watching as you take this topic forward. Thank you very much, and thank you to our audience for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.